I have with me here Jonathan Richter and Dennis Beck, and I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves. John, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Dr. Jonathan Richter, and I'm the department chair for media design, film, and television at Salish Kootenai College on the Flathead Indian Reservation in western Montana. I'm also the executive director for the Immersive Learning Research Network. Glad to be here.
I have you too. Dennis?
Yes, I am Dennis Beck. I am an assistant professor of educational technology at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, Arkansas, in the United States of America. And I am very excited. The last couple of years, I've been a part of, probably the last 3 years, of ilRN, the Immersive Learning Network, which John started. And I have been the publications chair for the conference, the iLearn conference, the last couple of years. And so that's kept me pretty busy and interacting with all the different constituents and stakeholders involved in the organization.
It's good to have you guys here. And so, like I like to do, we're going to keep things, as mentioned before, a little bit informal and relaxed. And uh, with the Immersive Learning Research Network, which is iLearn, which we are all a part of. I presented there last year, and um, it was a really great experience in Santa Barbara. I mean, between the place and the people, it was just a really fascinating time, and I learned a tremendous amount. And so, really, where I'd kind of like to start with our discussion is, what do we consider immersive learning? I mean, it's one of those terms that kind of buzzes around and everybody talks about it, but it can be sometimes hard to define. So, uh, what is it that we consider immersive learning?
Well, that's a great question, really. I mean, I think immersive learning is sort of the original, foundation for how people learn normally. When you're born into an immersive world where the world surrounds you, and you learn to use your ears and your eyes and your sense of touch to interact with the world. Now, of course, we're talking about education technology, and specifically research in a form of education technology that itself is also immersive. So the immersive aspect of digital education technologies, I think, obviously extends into the realm of video games, virtual reality, augmented reality, haptic interface, um, and a variety of techniques, pedagogical techniques, for bringing people into an experience where the world is situated around them and they have a sense of agency. So I like to use that situated, sort of ecological learning as kind of the way that I think about digital technology for learning's sake when it comes to immersion.
Situated component that really gets into that. If we're going to talk about immersion, we have to talk about why we think immersion works, and so that brings us back into the realm of psychology, cognition, social interaction. One of the big discussions that I was having yesterday with some colleagues here in North Texas was when we talk about, say, video games, which is where I've done a lot of my work, is it really being acted upon by the game that really causes us to learn, or is it about the overall experience from beginning to end? Is it your experiences with the others as you try to learn from the game or with others? And so when we talk about immersive learning, for me, I really moving on towards some of what you pointed out before, which is the experience. It is an immersive experience that really simulates a lot of aspects that we want learners to experience, which they might not otherwise be able to easily. Simulations tend to make things safer for us. We don't really want to practice walking along the edge of a mountain where the bottom is filled with lava and actually have real world consequences because that might be wildly irresponsible of us. But we do want students to learn the skills in a safe space, which is one of the things that I've always found game simulations, virtual experiences helpful for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
What do you think?
absolutely. There's also that's a great point. And looking at it, what are immersive learning experiences good for, or how are they better than other kinds of learning experiences, oftentimes cheaper ones. Um, you know, being able that situated aspect of being able to put somebody um, into the to have the perspective of it can have a whole variety of advantages. If you want to understand the scale of the universe, being able to put somebody into a simulation of space where they can see the vastness and emptiness of space relative to the planets and other types of stars and other cosmic bodies. Um, Immersion might provide some things that might impact the learner a little better. Going the other direction, though, too, how what is it like at the nanotech, or what is it at the smallest level, what's going on there, and for you to experience things, sort of the honey I shrunk the kids idea, that you could actually see from the perspective of a flea or smaller, um, might be of real interest. And there's so many different ways to use the immersive learning experience too. Like the real world, the physical world around us, has so many invisible things that are of interest to us. And using augmented reality, we can those invisible things can be highlighted for us, so that as a form of scaffolding, or as a way of really interacting with the abstract, or literally the invisible in ways that we couldn't before. Having a Geiger counter handy, could be useful in certain radioactive situations, as an example.
Absolutely. Well, especially if you think about areas where, like in Chernobyl region, I've watched some documentaries recently. If you needed to be able to simulate what kinds of safety techniques people who might be going in to clean up, or at Fukushima would need to be able to experience in a safe space where they can make mistakes before they actually have to do it, that would be incredibly helpful.
Right, and I mean, even coming down to, there's people of all walks of life who have all these different kinds of expertise, and if we could show the novice, the amateur, the person who's just beginning to learn or doesn't know anything about that particular area of expertise, if you could visually create scaffolds for how the expert considers the given domain. It could be architecture, it could be physics, it could be biomedicine, um, it could be race car driving. There's a number of things that I think user interfaces are soon going to be available to many different people that we could use to leverage that kind of expertise and create pathways for people that didn't exist before.
Yeah, and John, by the way, mute your mic when you're not talking.
I'm sorry.
Mute your mic when you're not talking.
Oh yes, sorry.
No, just to add on that, to me, immersion is a lot. It's kind of summed up in what my 11-year-old boy um, once said. I asked him, what, how would you define immersive learning? And he said, it's being it's being sucked into something and not being let go until you learn what you need to learn. Um, so in some ways, there's a sort of obviously there is a an act of the will where you're deciding to allow yourself to be sucked in, but there's an involuntary component as well, of being sucked in to um, into the experience, and it's exploring. We have talks about Minecraft a lot because he loves Minecraft, but in obviously a very low res experience. But for him, he's exploring different roles and different skills and doing different things that he's never even thought of before in that game, Minecraft. And for him, it's a very immersive experience, um, compared to doing something where he's in a classroom and doing a worksheet or being lectured to or something like that. So very different in that
Idea of being able to take on different roles. That's one of those things that we always kind of talk about, or kids read about what scientists do. They read about what writers do. They read about these things, but they rarely have the opportunity to actually take on that role and understand what it would feel like to actually do these jobs, these tasks in a meaningful way. They can really kind of guide them to what they want to do in the future. It's and to really understand what you want to do, or whether it's applicable to you, whether it's something that you're truly passionate about, having that experience to move into it is super helpful. um, I remember when I was in, I think, sixth grade. Do you guys remember having to do the career aptitude testing stuff with, like, those things were awful. I got yelled at by my mom after doing it because I didn't really understand what college was or graduate school or anything at the time because I was in sixth grade. So they asked this one question, which is, how much education do you want to have? And I'm like, college is good, 4 year college, that's great. So it recommended I be a police officer, which is what most of my relatives were in law enforcement. And my mother was kind of horrified because she wanted me to go all the way on to a PhD, which I clearly have done. But you don't know what you want to do when you're a kid. But if you have the experience of this is what the job is, it really can guide you into some important things. And that's kind of fun.
regard. And I think so much of education is that it's trying out things, it's exploring, it's experimenting, it's casting aside and trying something different. I just heard a lecture by an inner city principal who kind of summed up his his whole approach as basically presenting the why and talking completely to his students and faculty in the school about the why of doing things, about why we educate, why we learn, and kind of building around the why of things. And I think immersive learning helps. You could say it. It kind of it can equip us. It can provide different tools to use to really make the why possible, and understanding the why to get really excited about things that we didn't know about. I mean, if you think about it, I'm about 5'8" and overweight, and if I ever wanted to experience um, slam dunking, it's going to be in another lifetime, brother. So it's but in immersive learning with the right tools, I could experience the slam dunk of basketball, and then take that to another level. Um, what if I had certain physical special needs, where I was perhaps disabled, and was unable to walk. But in a virtual environment, I was able to run, and experience things like that. How much different would my life turn out? having that experience.
Absolutely. And I think it comes down to that idea of immersion. When you're immersed in something, the outside world disappears. You become sort of one with that subject. The Csikszentmihalyi from University of Chicago did a lot of research on that, and when people really, when that subject object disappears, you really get that new perspective. And like you say, Dennis, I think that really comes back to sort of the real calling for what education is supposed to be about. I don't think the compelling why. Why are we learning all of these different things? And studying and testing and assessment have we have to demonstrate that we're getting value for our buck, but setting things up so that you can lead students to have an immersive experience kind of points us back in the direction of why we're doing this in the first place, and so that they can learn new perspectives, so that they can understand things inside and out, so that they can discover the things that motivate them the most. So yeah, I think although it's a difficult subject to kind of get our arms around, to me this immersive learning thing is endlessly exciting for people who are really invested in education.
Two examples that I've been giving lately when people ask me, because it's a big thing at my university right now, talking about augmented reality and how we can bring all these things in. And your average professor or student who wants to understand what kind of immersive learning really looks like, for me, immersive learning is usually longer term. It's not just we do it for 15 minutes and then we're done. It's a longer term experience, and so the examples that I usually give are like The Matrix, when Neo is learning to fight for the first time in this safe space, in this safe room. I was watching that recently, and while it's an older film, a lot of people like that. A lot of people are inspired by things like Star Trek's Holodeck. That's one of the places where people would train, or X-Men's Danger Room, which I was heavily inspired by when I was a kid because I was a huge comic book geek. But things like Ender's Game, the novel and the movie wasn't spectacular, but the novel was always amazing for me because this was a long-term, fully experiential sort of learning experience for these kids. And while you can question some of the ethics of having kids fight aliens without knowing they're actually doing it, um, that seamless transition between the practice in this safe space into real world work through this context of immersion, this quality of augmentation, simulation, virtual senses. I just, uh, that's always been a good way for me to explain to other people what it is that I try to do when I develop games, when I try to immerse people. And so it's been kind of really on my mind lately. So I'm glad you guys are here and talking about all those.
Yeah, it's Ender's Game was foundational for me back in the late '80s in high school. Uh, Reading about that and thinking about the possibilities for being able to enter other worlds and not just play things but also learn about them. So yeah, boy, fast forward now, it's almost like we're living science fiction. There's so many potential technologies out there, or on the cusp. Um, virtual reality is the #1 design job globally. I was just reading, not fact verified, but I at least saw that hype, that they're really looking for people who are skilled in designing in VR. But I think fundamentally it comes back to that, psychological experience of immersion. You can read a good novel like Ender's Game back in the day and just become completely immersed in it. It's the idea that we can design experiences using digital technologies with various affordances to take advantage of certain human vulnerabilities that lead towards that sense of immersion. And I think that's why sometimes, we tend to look at the technologies, the virtual reality, the augmented reality, as a efficient way to gain immersion. But I think it's also of interest to just really study the psychological and social aspects of it as well.
Yeah, I really love that concept. That's one of the things that it can be hard because of the siloing, especially in academia. These kinds of products, you mentioned design. Design thinking is a really big thing right now. Design thinking requires understanding the multidisciplinary nature of experience. It is not just one thing. It is psychological, it is social, it is haptic, it is engineered in a way that merges these things strategically to build an experience for someone. If it's not engineered well, if it is not considerate of how people learn, how people interact with one another, with information, with visual design, auditory design, and when I think about, say, a university, we've got all these separate colleges, but to design a product in a corporation for building a game, for example, it requires aspects pretty much of every one of those different elements that are spread out through an entire massive university. And having them separate really does a disservice to design thinking that is very convergent in order to really immerse people in an experience. And it's one of those things that I think is probably one of the hardest things for me as an academic is that sense of isolation, that everybody values their own things above everybody else's without a recognition of their relationships and their syntheses and how they work together in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Well, and you just really helped us write the byline for ilRN, for the Immersive Learning Research Network. That would go great on our webpage right there. That is indeed. There's so much that goes into developing, designing, creating an immersive experience, and there's so much across the various disciplines that can shine a light on different parts of that, from computer science to game development to psychology to educational research and the learning sciences. It goes on and on. And we're really trying to create this network of researchers, practitioners, developers to kind of come together and create at least a small portion of publicly accessible knowledge base around this, because this is quite a struggle when you're working with sort of the medieval old design of the universities, where everything's divided up into various subjects and parceled out across various journals. We'd like to sort of highlight that construct of immersion and kind of get everybody circled around it and see what comes out of it. So that's our networking effort.
Launches us right into our kind of next component of our discussion today, which is really, what is ilRN? What is the Immersive Learning Network? Where did it come from? What's its kind of evolution? And we've kind of talked about its focus at this point, which is immersive learning and its multidisciplinary facets. But then where did all this come from? Because I'd heard about it for years, but you guys got me involved a bit last year, and that was really I don't know a lot about the history or anything. So you guys tell us a little bit about that.
John, why don't you share from kind of your perspective as the founder, and then I'll share from my perspective as someone who was kind of outside looking in for a little bit.
I don't know about outside looking in, Dennis. You're just as guilty as I am. um, but yeah, well, I guess about 2006 at the American Education and Research Association, a number of ed tech researchers who were there presenting were talking about. It started sort of from the idea of virtual worlds with Second Life and some of the other um, virtual worlds that were kind of being used for teaching and learning within education. And the idea to create a special interest group, AERA, the American Education Research Association, has a number of special interest groups, which are official arms of AERA. And the idea to form something around virtual environments popped up. And back home at the University of Oregon, when I was a research associate there at the Center for Advanced Technology and Education, my boss, Lynn Anderson Inman, encouraged me to, post conference to take that on. So I networked up with some of those folks, and Lynn connected me with one of a personal friend of hers, who is Chris Deedy from Harvard. And I got real starry-eyed because Chris is somebody that I've followed from not only education technologies, but also futures. He was a member of the World Future Society when he used to work at University of Houston, Clear Lake. And just have always really appreciated everything that Chris Deedy has to say or write. And after a couple emails, he agreed to be our sort of co-founder and sort of help us steward the development of this special interest group on virtual environments. So we were off and running, and I think, were officially going in 2006 or 7. We changed our name in between there because we felt that people were not really seeing themselves within the virtual environments. They sort of pegged that as a Second Life or virtual worlds thing. And we really were, even at that age, like from the beginning, really wanted to embrace this larger spectrum. Milgram spectrum, a lot of people might be familiar with that, where the user is either fully ensconced within the virtual environment, or the world, the physical world, is what you're situated within, and the digital is just the little bits, and then all points in between. So we were really trying to attract not only virtual, but also augmented and other kinds of immersive. So we did change from ARVL, virtual environments for learning, to Ariel, applied research in immersive environments for learning. The problem was that this was all only education researchers. So every year at AERA, although we were a fairly healthy special interest group, we felt like we were kind of delivering pizzas to one another. That we weren't getting the game developers, the computer scientists, the psychologists, and other people from various disciplines who we felt really needed to be at the table involved. And so with Chris and the rest of the Ariel SIG's blessing, I stepped away from the SIG and started working with a group in Europe who had been with the immersive education group, but for various reasons had decided that that the immersive education group was not working for them. So we started putting together our own immersive learning research network, and it'd be 3 years ago. Would be our inaugural conference in Prague at the Ambient and Intelligent Environments Conference. That was an IEEE conference. And then last year we had our second annual in Santa Barbara. And then this year we'll be in Portugal, in Coimbra, for our third annual. And yeah, so I guess that's the elevator speech. Um, Dennis, what do you say?
Me, I was still in diapers whenever John was doing that thing in 2006. No, just kidding. I was, you could call it academic diapers. I was a grad student at the University of Florida, and I was working on my dissertation at the time, kind of just getting it going, involving avatars in Second Life, and the impact of avatar gender and ethnicity on students' expectations and perceptions. Um, and then kind of a funny thing happened. It was that I met Lisa Dolly. It really seemed very random. It was at a teaching and learning in Second Life seminar that I was attending, and at the end of that, she invited me to um, to actually she asked to see some of my research for the Department of Defense, which I did. I showed her that. It was an immersive city in Second Life called Second China, and she asked me to send my resume to her, my Vita, which I did, and literally within about a 2 week period, I interviewed for a visiting professor position and was offered the job. I was not thinking of heading into academia at the time. I was thinking of continuing to work for the large nonprofit that I was working for, and just kind of turned my head around a little bit and finally decided to make the choice to go that direction and to be a visiting assistant professor at Boise State. And one of the first things that Lisa started working on with was getting me involved in professional organizations. And AERA 2010 was my first conference that I attended. And she got me involved in Ariel because I think at the time she might have been even the the, uh, the chair of Ariel. Is that right, John? Anyways, I think so. Um, so I ended up getting involved, very involved with Ariel. Still am very involved with Ariel. But just in the process
You
of it,
there?
yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think Lisa was the chair at that time. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, still very involved. And what we realized just through a series of circumstances was that Ariel was doing a pretty good job of focusing on the academic aspects of it within education, but and was pretty satisfied and happy with staying in that sphere. And so when John stepped out to start up iLearn, I kind of kept an eye on him and kept asking, how can I be involved? How can I be involved? How can I be involved? And he eventually drew me in, and now I'm the publications chair for iLearn. But I think that the main difference that I see between iLearn and Ariel Sig, both being great organizations, by the way. I'm the incoming chair for Ariel Sig, so I'm definitely not speaking poorly about Ariel. Um, is that Ariel Sig is an academic conference SIG that's centered and rooted in education, whereas iLearn is one that is focused, that's interdisciplinary. You will meet people there from just such a wide spectrum of academic areas, of just areas of life in general, um, and different levels of expertise, different types of expertise, and that whole concept of the silos, Scott, that you were talking about earlier, completely shattered. My first conference was last summer that I was publications chair for, and attending it, was almost a revelation for me, where I just experienced and so much great feedback and research, and seeing different people's research, and just having great opportunities to network and build relationships with other scholars and other people who were, not just scholars but were practitioners in the field of immersive learning, and being able to translate too, between different fields. It took a little bit of time, and it still does, but it's such a worthwhile opportunity. And I'm so looking forward to Coimbra in 2017.
Excellent. Well, and yeah, I've had some similar experiences as well. I was program chair for Ariel in 2009 or 2010. I don't remember what, which is part of how I met both of y'all. And last summer was my first iLearn, which was just, I hadn't really gotten to go to conferences previously where there were folks from engineering and folks from design and art, and I'd always just kind of gone to education conferences, and I'd done a lot of the stuff on Second Life and work in virtual worlds previous to that. But some of the things that I was seeing in this, where people could bring in technologies that I didn't even know existed to map out, uh, was it a medieval chapel in Scotland, so that you can build much better models for simulation, and just the ideas that kind of blossom from that ability to cross pollinate was really fascinating to see. I was able to find entire new areas to look into to support my writing and my thinking, which was just something that, because of the silos that you mentioned, Dennis, it just was eye-opening for me. And on top of that, everybody's just super friendly, and it, that's not always the case at a lot of conferences. My first experience presenting a virtual world at the American Educational Research Association conference, based on my dissertation, a little over a decade ago now, was horrifying because people weren't there really to be supportive. They were there to push their own personal agendas. And I got, not just what I did got attacked, I got personally attacked by one or more people in the room. And it just wasn't collegial at all. Whereas Immersive Learning Research Network really is. And that presentation where I got attacked was not an aerial presentation. It was a bigger, uh, what was it? It was just a big learning technologies related piece, and I didn't really want to go back after that. It was such a negative experience. But with iLearn and then the other work that I did with Ariel, everybody's there to listen. They're there to learn from each other. It's been really interesting, and honestly, it feels a lot like what I see with the folks with IT Forum, where people want to share knowledge and information. They really here to help people out, and AECT often has a lot of that flavor as well when you go to the conference. And but AECT can also still be a little bit siloed. It's very ed tech focused, and so you don't really get a lot of folks from other fields. I don't see a lot of people coming in from business. I don't see a lot of folks from engineering or art. Whereas iLearn, you really get folks who just have a wide range of skills and abilities, the kinds of things that you would see in any really successful gaming, augmented reality, or virtual reality project. And just from an idea generation standpoint, I think it's really helpful. So, yeah, I'm glad y'all had me do that last summer. I really appreciate it. Um,
Well, we really, really appreciated your involvement and really are excited to keep that going. I mean, that's, I think one of the things that's maybe a little bit different is that we're actually, some of these organizations are so broadly writ, education research, for instance. And it's so big, there's upwards of 17 to 20,000 people at those conferences. And the only thing that they necessarily share is an interest in educational research. But that can go in so many different directions that sometimes it can actually be a little bit hard to um, find areas of common interest or even methods of common interest. Whereas with iLearn, we're trying to embrace this construct, this idea of immersion through digital assistance in some way. And because of its rapidly growing, changing nature, right, with all the technology that keeps coming out and changing the game, so to speak, and its interdisciplinary and international flavor, there's this sort of common goal, this common mission, this common vision that we have to understand this thing together, and that it's bigger than any one of us, even with all of our doctorates. But there's something that other people in their silos and their perspectives with their methodologies that can really shine a light on this subject in a way that I'd never considered before. So it's new technologies, but it's also it's new methods, it's new ways of engineering the or viewing the problem. And that tends to me, it's kind of leading towards this community feeling, because we're all working on the same ill-structured problem together. So the network itself is actually trying to build in, like, how do we break down the silos? How do we take the buzzwords that happen to be in any particular discipline and connect them to the buzzwords and the disciplinary specificities that exist in this other discipline? How can we scan the environment together for the emerging trends and events and research articles or pedagogical practices that are existing anywhere in the world around these different immersive things, and how can we then filter them and translate them together so that people within the network can make use of them? Varieties of projects like that. So it's not simply the conference. We're also trying to come up with accessible, easy to use, high value products and services that researchers from across these different disciplines can make use of.
That's right, John. And one of the things that for me I've experienced is every field has what I call aha moments in their history. And I'm most familiar with ed tech and instructional design. And as you all know, you both know, one of the things are media comparison studies, right? And the significant difference versus no significant difference debate and things like that. And being able to talk about issues like that, um, those aha moments in our history with people from other fields is very, very profitable, because then we see things and research that they've done that can potentially apply to those aha moments. And they can then take what we've experienced and apply to their aha moments. And we see this cross pollination happening, not just at the conference, but in our organization, in iLearn, um, from the bottom level. When I say bottom level, from just the person involved at the ground floor, through discussions, online discussions, through interactions, through community events. One of the things we do is we game together. We like to play games together. We'll go visit an immersive environment together at a conference, or perhaps sometimes locally. We have the Versatilist podcast, which, not to compete with you, Scott, not meant that way at all, but is a great podcast that Patrick does on a regular basis, and focus on immersive learning and iLearn type related stuff. So I mean, I just think it's really interesting to see um, kind of an organization that is trying to break the mold, and I think that's kind of what we're going for. We want to break the mold of what's been done in the past, and kind of everybody's welcome, and we're all focusing on this one ill-structured problem, like John mentioned, and that being how do we do immersive learning?
I think that is a really great place to kind of end on. Can you note when the conference is this summer? Yeah.
The Immersive Learning Research Network Conference, our third annual, will be in Coimbra, Portugal, June 26th through June 29th of this year. So we've got over 80 papers that have been accepted. So it's going to be a jam-packed conference.
It's fantastic. Do you want to preview our future locations? Because I can't go this summer because of a conflict, but I'm very excited about next summer.
Yeah, next summer we're actually going to be coming here to Western Montana. It'll be also the last week of June, and it'll be featured between Missoula, Montana, and Pablo, Montana, with a trip to Glacier Park planned. And the theme of next year, although we are welcoming immersive learning research and projects to be showcased from everywhere, we're going to have a special focus on environmental science and cultural heritage. So should be a good time next year if you can't make it. So we go back and forth between the Americas and Europe, at least for now, until maybe we've been talking about maybe doing something in South America too. But so far, Europe does one, and then America does one, and then that's vice versa. So 2017 Portugal, 2018 Montana, 2019 I think we're hopefully going to be going to London. I think that's not fully verified yet, but that's a little sneak preview.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for this. A lot of really great information and just a lot of fun. So I appreciate it very much, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thank you, Scott and IT Forum, for allowing us to talk to you about what's going on, and we hope to see all of you. Go to the iLearn website, that's immersivelrn.org, and sign up for a membership. It's free for now, but it might not be for very long. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Scott?
Absolutely. And I will talk to you soon. And thank you, IT Forum, for listening.
Take care.